Imagine this. You're standing in the kitchen of a Michelin-starred restaurant on the biggest night of your career, except you're not standing at the chef's table. You're standing at the dish pit. Your mother-in-law has just handed you a stained apron in front of 60 guests and announced that since you love playing house in the kitchen so much, you might as well make yourself useful and start scrubbing pots. Your fiancé laughed. His sister took a photo, and the apron she gave you had a name embroidered on it. It didn't say chef. It didn't say Rachel. It said dishwasher. Would you take off that apron and walk out? Or would you tie it tighter and let them dig their own grave? 4 months ago, that humiliation at my future mother-in-law's annual charity gala became the spark that burned the Harrington restaurant empire to the ground. While they were handing me a dirty apron, I was secretly behind the most talked-about restaurant opening Chicago had seen in a decade. While they called me the dishwasher, I was 48 hours away from being named one of Food and Wine magazine's top new chefs in America. My name is Rachel Castillo. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how being called the dishwasher led to a health department shutdown, a federal tax investigation, and my mother-in-law sobbing on the 6 o'clock news. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever had someone dismiss your dreams as a cute little hobby, stay until the end. This one's for you. Let me give you the full picture of the Harrington family. Harrington Hospitality Group, 14 restaurants across Illinois and Wisconsin, $95 million in annual revenue, a catering empire that fed every corporate event, political fundraiser, and society wedding from Lakeshore Drive to Milwaukee. My future mother-in-law, Diane Harrington, guilt it after her husband died in 2009 and never let anyone forget it. She was on the cover of Chicago magazine twice. The Tribune called her the Queen of Chicago Dining. She sat on the board of the James Beard Foundation and personally vetted every chef who worked in her kitchens. My fiancé, Ethan Harrington, was the heir apparent. 31, MBA from Northwestern, ran the business side while Diane controlled the creative. His sister, Meredith, 27, managed their social media and events, which mostly meant posting Instagram stories from VIP tables and taking credit for other people's work. And then there was me. I grew up in Pilsen, daughter of a line cook from Puebla and a pastry chef from Oaxaca. My parents ran a 12-seat restaurant out of our house until I was 14, when my mother got sick and they had to close. I worked my way through culinary school at Kendall College, staged at Alinea for 2 years, and by 26 I was sous chef at one of the best restaurants in the West Loop. But I wanted more. I'd been developing my own concept since college, a modern Mexican tasting menu that honored my parents' techniques with fine dining precision, the kind of food that made critics rethink everything they assumed about Mexican cuisine. I met Ethan at a food and wine event in 2022. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely proud of what I was building. For the first 6 months, he was my biggest cheerleader. He told his mother I was special. He told his friends I was brilliant. That changed the moment Diane decided I wasn't. The first real sign came at Thanksgiving 2023. 16 Harringtons gathered around the table at Diane's Gold Coast mansion. I'd offered to cook, thinking it would be a gesture. Diane shut it down before I finished the sentence. We have a private chef for a reason, Rachel. Thanksgiving isn't the time for experiments. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. She doesn't mean it like that, he whispered. But I saw the look he exchanged with Meredith. Relief that Mom had handled it. When the private chef brought out a dry, overcooked turkey and grainy mashed potatoes, Diane declared it the best Thanksgiving yet. Meredith raised her glass. Only the best for the Harrington table. Nobody looked at me. 2 weeks later, Diane sent an email to the entire family. Subject line: Holiday Gift Guide. Under each family member's name was a curated list of luxury items. Ethan, a Breitling watch. Meredith, a weekend at Canyon Ranch. Under my name she'd written, cooking class voucher. Maybe she'll finally learn proper technique. I stared at that email for a long time. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because it told me exactly where I stood. Diane Harrington didn't see me as her son's partner. She saw me as a project that needed fixing, a girl from Pilsen who had wandered into the wrong zip code. What Diane didn't know was that I'd already signed a lease. 3,200 square feet on Randolph Street, right in the heart of Restaurant Row. My restaurant, Ofrenda, was already under construction. I'd secured $1.8 million in funding from two investors who believed in my vision. The build-out was happening. The menu was tested. My team was hired. I told no one in the Harrington family. Not Ethan. Not anyone. Because I'd learned something watching my parents lose their restaurant. Never show your hand until you're ready to play it. By January 2024, things escalated. Diane began a quiet campaign to redirect my career into the Harrington empire, on her terms. She offered me a position as a line cook at their flagship restaurant, Harrington Prime. Not sous chef, not chef de cuisine. Line cook. Entry level. As if my years of training, my time at Alinea, my own culinary identity, none of it counted. It would be so good for you, she told Ethan, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. She needs structure, discipline, a real kitchen, not whatever she's been doing on her own. Whatever I'd been doing on my own was developing recipes that a Michelin scout had already quietly tasted and praised. But Diane didn't know that either. Ethan came to me that night, with the offer framed as an opportunity. Mom thinks you'd really thrive at Harrington Prime. It's a great chance to learn the business from the inside. I looked at him carefully. Ethan, I was sous chef at a restaurant with 2 Michelin stars. Your mother's offering me a line cook position. He shifted. She's trying to include you, Rach. Don't make it a thing. Don't make it a thing. I filed that phrase away. It would become useful later. In February, I discovered something that changed everything. Not by accident, but almost. My contractor for Ofrenda, a man named Luis, who'd been doing restaurant build-outs in Chicago for 20 years, pulled me aside after a site visit. Rachel, I need to tell you something, he said, looking uncomfortable. I did work for Harrington Hospitality 3 years ago. Renovations at their Lincoln Park location and the Wicker Park place. I saw things. Things. He meant the kitchen at Harrington's Lincoln Park restaurant had been built with substandard ventilation that violated fire code. He meant the walk-in coolers at 2 locations were running at temperatures that would fail any health inspection. He meant he'd flagged these issues in writing and Diane had told him to finish the job and keep his mouth shut, or she'd make sure he never worked in Chicago again. Luis had kept copies of every email, every inspection he'd flagged, every photo of moldy grout and corroded pipes that the Harrington team had covered up with fresh paint before the health department's annual visit. I need you to understand, Luis said. I've got a family. 4 kids. I couldn't afford to lose every contract in the city. Diane Harrington knows everyone. But it's been eating at me. People eat at those restaurants. They bring their kids. I told Luis I wouldn't use his name without his permission. Then I went home and couldn't sleep. 14 restaurants, thousands of customers every week. And behind the gleaming dining rooms and the magazine covers, the kitchens were held together with duct tape and intimidation. I started documenting. Quietly, carefully. Through industry contacts, I connected with 3 former Harrington employees who'd been fired for raising safety concerns. One had reported a cockroach infestation at the Evanston location and was terminated the next day for performance issues. Another had documented improper food storage temperatures for 6 months before being let go. A third, a former general manager, had records showing that Diane personally authorized falsified health inspection prep sheets, essentially coaching staff on how to pass inspections while maintaining unsafe conditions the rest of the year. Each person had kept their own records. Emails, photos, dated notes. None of them had come forward because Diane's connections in the restaurant industry made her untouchable. She sat on charity boards with the alderman who oversaw licensing. She donated to the mayor's re-election campaign. The health inspectors who visited her restaurants always seemed to call ahead first. I compiled everything into a secure digital file and gave it to my lawyer, Sandra Okafor. Sandra was a food safety attorney who'd handled cases against 3 national restaurant chains. She looked at the evidence and went quiet for a long time. "Rachel," she finally said, "this isn't just code violations. If they're falsifying inspection records, that's fraud. And if anyone has gotten sick from their food, and they concealed the conditions, there's criminal liability here." "I know," I said, "but I need to be strategic about timing, because I had a restaurant opening in 7 weeks. And I had a charity gala to survive first." Diane's annual spring gala was the social event of the Harrington calendar. March 22nd, 2024, at their flagship restaurant in River North. 60 guests, a 5-course menu, silent auction, benefiting the Children's Hospital. Every food critic, restaurateur, and society columnist in Chicago would be there. My invitation arrived in a cream envelope with gold embossing. But when I opened it, the card inside wasn't an invitation. It was an assignment. "Rachel, you'll be helping coordinate back-of-house operations. Please arrive at 3 p.m. for setup. Wear black. Keep a low profile. We want the focus on Diane's vision." Ethan saw my face. "Babe, it's just logistics. Someone has to manage the kitchen flow. Mom trusts you with it." "That's actually a compliment." I almost laughed. "Your mother is telling me to work the kitchen at her party like hired help, and you think it's a compliment?" He frowned. "Why do you always have to make things difficult?" I didn't argue. I said okay, I would be there at 3. I would wear black. I would keep the lowest profile they'd ever seen. Because in 48 hours, Ofrenda's soft opening would happen 6 blocks away. And I needed Diane comfortable. I needed her believing she'd won. The day of the gala, I arrived at 3, as instructed. The kitchen was chaos, which I expected, because Harrington events were always chaos. The head chef, a man named Derek who'd been loyal to Diane for 12 years, ran the line like a drill sergeant while cutting every corner that mattered. I watched him pull a tray of sea bass from a cooler that felt warm to my hand. I watched a prep cook drop a garnish on the floor and put it right back on the plate. I watched, and I noted, and I said nothing. At 6 o'clock, guests began arriving. I was stationed by the service entrance, wearing the black shirt and pants they'd given me. No name tag this time. Something worse. Diane walked into the kitchen at 6:15, glowing in a silver Valentino dress, trailed by Meredith, who was already filming for Instagram. She stopped when she saw me. "Oh good, you're here." She looked me up and down. "Before you start plating, put this on." She held out an apron. Meredith giggled and kept filming. I unfolded it. Embroidered in pink cursive letters across the chest. "Dishwasher." Meredith posted it. She said later, and it got 47 likes in 10 minutes. "A custom apron," I said, keeping my voice even. "You had this made?" Diane smiled. I thought it was funny. "You're always talking about how you grew up washing dishes in your parents' little place. Consider it a tribute to your roots." 4 waiters stopped what they were doing. Derek looked at the floor. Even he couldn't pretend this was normal. I put the apron on. Let them see me wear it. Let them believe I'd accepted my place. Let Meredith post it everywhere. In 48 hours, that photo would become the most shared image in Chicago food media, but not for the reason they thought. The gala proceeded like every Harrington event, polished on the surface, rotten underneath. I plated dishes and watched. I carried trays and listened. Diane gave her annual speech about excellence and legacy and the Harrington commitment to quality. She used the word integrity 4 times. The irony tasted sharper than anything on the menu. During the main course, Ethan found me by the dish station. He'd had 3 glasses of wine. His mother's confidence was contagious after a few drinks. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "Mom's right that you should come work for us. Your little taco project is never going to compete with this." He gestured at the glittering dining room. "This is the big leagues, Rach. My little taco project." I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 2 years, and I felt something click into place. Not break, crystallize. I'd spent months hoping he'd stand up for me. hoping he'd see what his family was doing. But Ethan wasn't blind. He just agreed with them. He'd always agreed with them. He just hid it better. I smiled at him. "You're right. I should know my place." He looked satisfied, kissed my forehead. "That's my girl." I excused myself to the bathroom and sent 2 texts. The first to Sandra Okafor. "File the health department complaints Monday morning. All 14 locations." The second to my sous chef James. "Soft opening confirmed. Friday at 7. Tell the team we're ready." Then I went back to the dish pit, put on my dishwasher apron, and finished the night with a smile that none of them understood. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Sunday was final prep for Ofrenda's soft opening. My team of 12 worked through the night. The dining room was stunning: warm wood, hand-painted tiles from Oaxaca, an open kitchen where guests could watch every dish being crafted. Above the pass, a framed photo of my parents in their home kitchen, the only decoration I'd insisted on. Monday morning, Sandra filed formal complaints with the Chicago Department of Public Health, covering all 14 Harrington restaurants. Each complaint included dated photographic evidence, sworn statements from former employees, and documentation of falsified inspection records. She also filed a report with the Illinois Attorney General's office regarding the fraudulent inspection practices. Monday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tanya Reeves, food critic for the Chicago Tribune. She'd gotten a tip about the complaints. "Rachel," she said, "I can't reveal my source, but is it true you're behind the Harrington Health Department filings?" "I didn't file them," I said carefully. "Former employees did. I simply connected them with legal representation. And I have a restaurant opening Friday, if you're interested in a different kind of story." She was very interested. Tuesday, the health department conducted surprise inspections at 3 Harrington locations simultaneously. No advance warning. No friendly phone calls from connected aldermen. Sandra had specifically filed the complaints through state channels to bypass any local connections Diane might have. The results were devastating. Harrington Prime, the flagship, was cited for 17 violations, including improper food storage temperatures, evidence of pest activity, and a walk-in cooler that tested at 51 degrees, 11 degrees above the safe limit. The Lincoln Park location was shut down immediately for a failed ventilation system that posed a fire hazard. The Wicker Park restaurant received 23 violations, the most of any restaurant inspected in Chicago that quarter. By Wednesday, the story broke. The Tribune ran it front page. Chicago's restaurant queen faces health crisis across empire. Every local news channel had cameras outside Harrington Prime. Diane's spokesperson issued a statement calling the violations minor maintenance issues that would be addressed immediately. But Sandra wasn't done. On Thursday, she held a press conference with 3 former Harrington employees. They described, on camera, a culture of intimidation where safety concerns were dismissed, whistleblowers were fired, and inspection results were choreographed weeks in advance. One of them, a former sous chef named Maria Gutierrez, broke down crying as she described being told to serve salmon that had been sitting at room temperature for 4 hours during a Harrington catering event. 12 people got sick that night, Maria said. "I reported it. I was fired the next Monday. They said it was a performance issue." The Illinois Attorney General announced an investigation into potential fraud related to the falsified inspection documents. The IRS, separately, began looking into financial discrepancies in Harrington Hospitality's tax filings, issues that surfaced during the investigation when former employees mentioned cash payments and off-the-books labor. And through all of this, nobody connected me to any of it. To the Harringtons, I was still Rachel the dishwasher. Quiet, obedient, knowing her place. Friday, March 29th, 2024. 7 o'clock in the evening. Ofrenda opened its doors. I'd invited 40 guests for the soft opening. Food writers, chefs I admired, friends from culinary school, my investors, my parents who flew in from Arizona where they'd retired. I did not invite a single Harrington. My mother stood in the dining room, looking at the framed photo above the pass, her own image from 30 years ago. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she turned to me and held my face in her hands. Mija, she said, your abuela would burn this place down with pride. That made me laugh through tears, which was exactly what I needed before the most important dinner service of my life. We served 9 courses. Mole negro with 32 ingredients. The recipe my grandmother carried from Oaxaca in her memory because she couldn't carry it on paper. A ceviche that used techniques I'd learned at Alinea, applied to my mother's coastal recipe. A corn dessert that took 3 days to prepare and tasted like every birthday of my childhood. Tanya Reeves from the Tribune was at table 6. She ate in silence, which terrified me, and then she asked to see the kitchen, which terrified me more. She watched my team work for 20 minutes. Then she looked at me and said, I've been reviewing restaurants for 22 years. I'll have my review up by Sunday. The review posted Saturday night, actually. She couldn't wait. The headline, Ofrenda is the most important restaurant to open in Chicago this year, and maybe this decade. She wrote about the food. She wrote about the technique. She wrote about my parents' photo above the pass and what it meant to build something from love instead of ego. And in the final paragraph, she noted, without naming me directly in connection to the Harrington investigation, that Chicago's restaurant scene was experiencing a reckoning and that Ofrenda represented exactly the kind of integrity the industry needed. The reservation line crashed by Monday morning. We were booked solid for 3 months within 48 hours. And then the Harringtons found out. Meredith saw it first, of course. She was always on her phone. She sent a screenshot of the Tribune review to the family group chat. Did you guys know Rachel had a restaurant? Ethan called me 14 times. I didn't answer. He showed up at Ofrenda on Tuesday afternoon, just as I was prepping for dinner service. He walked through my dining room, looking at the tiles, the kitchen, the menu on the wall. His face cycled through confusion, anger, and something I'd never seen from him before. Fear. You built this, he said. While you were with me, while you were wearing that apron at Mom's Gala, you already had this. How long? 2 years of planning, I said, not looking up from my prep work. 14 months of construction. The lease was signed before your mother offered me a line cook position. He sat down heavily at the bar. The health department complaints, the inspections. That was you. I set down my knife. That was 4 former employees who were tired of being silenced. I simply made sure they found a lawyer who would listen. You're destroying my family. He said it like an accusation, but his voice cracked like a confession. Your family's kitchens are making people sick, Ethan. Your mother falsified health inspections for years. She fired everyone who tried to speak up. I didn't create those violations. I just stopped helping your family hide them. He stared at me. And the gala? The apron? You just, what, stood there and smiled? I needed your mother comfortable, I said. I needed her believing I was nothing. Because if she'd known what was coming, she'd have used every connection she had to bury it before anyone got hurt. More hurt, I mean. Ethan stood up. His jaw was tight. We're done, Rachel. You know that, right? I pulled off my engagement ring and set it on the bar between us. We were done the night you called my life's work a little taco project. You just didn't know it yet. He took the ring and left. He didn't look back at my restaurant. I think if he'd really looked at what I'd built, he might have understood. But understanding would have required seeing me as something other than the dishwasher, and the Harringtons had never been capable of that. The fallout hit fast. Diane's empire crumbled over the next 6 weeks in ways I couldn't have predicted even if I'd wanted to. The health department shut down 4 more locations after expanded inspections. The Attorney General's investigation revealed that falsified documents went back at least 5 years. The IRS audit uncovered $3 million in unreported income and off-the-books labor payments, mostly to undocumented kitchen workers who'd been paid below minimum wage and threatened with deportation if they complained. That last part broke something in me. I was the daughter of immigrants. My parents had built their lives in this country cooking food with dignity and love. And Diane Harrington, the woman who'd looked down on my roots, had been exploiting workers just like my parents, paying them nothing, threatening them, and then showing up to charity galas talking about community and integrity. Diane held a press conference in early April. She blamed a rogue manager. She blamed outdated systems. She blamed everyone except herself. But the former employees had documentation that went directly to her personal email, decisions that only a CEO would make, threats that only someone with her specific power could deliver. 7 of the 14 restaurants closed permanently. Harrington Hospitality's annual revenue dropped from $95 million to an estimated $30 million overnight. The brand that had taken 15 years to build became toxic in 15 days. Diane called me once. I let it go to voicemail. "Rachel," she said, her voice stripped of its usual command. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but you don't understand what you've done. This company is my life. These restaurants are my legacy. I built this from nothing after my husband died, and you've destroyed it because of what? A silly apron? A joke? I was going to welcome you into this family, Rachel. I was going to give you everything." I saved that voicemail. Not out of spite, but because it was the most honest she'd ever been. In 60 seconds, she revealed the core of her worldview. Her legacy mattered more than the health of her customers, the rights of her workers, and the dignity of the woman her son loved. The apron wasn't a joke. It was a confession. But I need to tell you something important. I didn't do any of this for revenge. I know how it looks. I know the timeline makes it seem like I orchestrated a takedown, but those health violations existed before I ever met Ethan. Those workers were being exploited before I ever set foot in a Harrington kitchen. The only thing I did was refuse to keep the secret. In the restaurant world, there's a term called mise en place. Everything in its place. It's the principle that a clean, organized kitchen produces the best food. What the Harringtons had built was the opposite. A beautiful dining room hiding a rotting foundation. All I did was open the kitchen door and let people see what was really inside. The personal aftermath was harder than I expected. Ethan sent a series of increasingly desperate texts over the following weeks. First angry, then bargaining, then sad. He never once acknowledged what his family had done wrong. He never mentioned the sick customers, the fired whistleblowers, the exploited workers. His grief was entirely for the empire, never for its victims. Meredith posted a tearful Instagram video about being targeted by jealous competitors. She didn't mention me by name, but her followers connected the dots. Half of them defended her. The other half flooded her comments with links to the Tribune article. She turned off comments within an hour. Diane's seat on the James Beard Foundation board was quietly revoked. Her Chicago magazine covers disappeared from the restaurant walls. The society invitations evaporated. The woman who had once commanded every room in Chicago now couldn't get a reservation at a restaurant she didn't own. I didn't celebrate any of it. There's no victory in watching people lose everything, even people who hurt you. What I felt instead was something quieter, relief. The weight of their contempt, their dismissal, their constant insistence that I was less than, it was gone. Not because they'd changed, but because I'd stopped carrying it. Therapy helped. My therapist, Dr. Kwan, asked me once why I'd stayed with Ethan so long after I realized his family would never accept me. I sat with that question for a whole session before I could answer honestly. Because my parents lost their restaurant, I finally said. They lost everything they'd built because they didn't have connections, didn't have power, didn't have anyone in their corner. Part of me thought that if I could earn a place in the Harrington family, I could protect myself from what happened to them, that I'd finally be safe. Dr. Kwan looked at me. "And are you safe now?" I thought about Ofrenda. My team. My investors who believed in me. My parents who flew to Chicago for opening night. My sous chef James, who'd left a Michelin-starred kitchen to take a chance on my vision. "I'm safe," I said. I built my own safety. I didn't need theirs. Setting boundaries meant cutting cleanly. I blocked Ethan, Meredith, and Diane on everything. Sandra sent a formal letter to the Harrington family attorney. No direct contact. All communication through legal counsel. I wasn't angry. I was done. There's a difference. The hardest call was with Ethan's cousin, Marcus Harrington, the only family member who'd ever treated me with respect. He called to tell me he understood. He'd seen how they treated me. He'd said nothing. And he was sorry. I appreciate that, I told him. But watching someone drown and feeling bad about it isn't the same as throwing them a rope. He was quiet. Then he said, "You're right, and I'm sorry for that too." I didn't stay angry at Marcus. But I didn't invite him to a friend's official opening either. Understanding my worth meant understanding that kindness without action is just comfort for the bystander. By September 2024, Ofrenda had received its first Michelin star. We were the youngest chef-owned restaurant in Chicago to receive the honor in over a decade. Food and Wine named me one of their top new chefs. The New York Times ran a profile that focused not on the Harrington drama, but on my food, my heritage, my parents' influence. The Little Taco Project was now the hardest reservation to get in the Midwest. I used the platform to do what the Harringtons never did. I paid every member of my team a living wage with full benefits. I created an apprenticeship program for young cooks from underserved neighborhoods, kids who reminded me of myself at 16, talented and hungry and invisible to the people with power. I partnered with the Illinois Restaurant Association to advocate for stronger health inspection transparency, pushing for unannounced inspections as the standard, not the exception. Luis, my contractor, the man who'd risked everything to show me the truth about Harrington's kitchens, I offered him the contract for Ofrenda's second location. He cried when I called. "I told my wife," he said. "I told her that someday, someone would actually do the right thing with what I showed them." She said I was naive. I can't wait to tell her she was wrong. Maria Gutierrez, the sous chef who'd been fired for reporting the salmon incident, I hired her as my pastry chef. Her churro-inspired dessert tasting became one of our most popular courses. She told me once, between services, that she'd almost left the restaurant industry entirely after what Diane did to her. "I thought maybe the whole industry was like that," she said. "You showed me it doesn't have to be." My parents came for Thanksgiving 2024, not to the Gold Coast, not to a mansion, to Ofrenda after service, when the dining room was empty and the kitchen was clean, and the only people at the table were the ones who'd earned their place through love. My father, who hadn't cooked professionally in 15 years, made his mole for the staff. He stood at my stove, in my kitchen, in the restaurant his daughter built, and he made the recipe his mother taught him. My mother raised a glass of horchata, because she'd never liked wine. "To Rachel," she said, her English still carrying the rhythm of Puebla, who showed the world what a dishwasher can build. The table laughed. James, my sous chef. Maria. Luis. Sandra. My parents. Not a single Harrington. And not a single empty seat. You know what I think about most, looking back? Not the gala, not the apron, not the look on Ethan's face when he saw Ofrenda for the first time. I think about the 12 people who got sick from that salmon. I think about the workers who were paid under the table and threatened into silence. I think about Maria crying at a press conference because she tried to do the right thing and lost her career for it. Diane Harrington didn't fall because I was angry. She fell because her empire was built on the backs of people she considered disposable. The dishwashers, the line cooks, the prep cooks who showed up at 5 in the morning and left at midnight, the people whose names never appeared on magazine covers or charity gala invitations. I know what it feels like to be disposable, to have someone hand you a stained apron and tell you it's where you belong, to have the person you love laugh instead of defend you. To build something extraordinary and have it called a little hobby by people who couldn't taste the difference between frozen and fresh. But here's what the Harringtons never understood. The people in the dish pit, the ones scrubbing pots at midnight, the ones who get handed the dirty apron, we're the ones who keep the kitchen running. Without us, there is no empire, there is no magazine cover, there is no charity gala. We are the foundation, and when you poison the foundation, The whole building comes down. My name is Rachel Castillo. I'm the dishwasher who cleaned house. And the only thing I regret is not opening Ofrenda sooner. If my story meant something to you, subscribe and share it with someone who's been made to feel small by people who should have lifted them up. What dream have you been told is too small to matter? Tell me in the comments. And remember, nobody gets to tell you your place. You build it yourself.